Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Get Healthy Tampa Bay podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kerry Reller, and today we have Dr. Dana Gibbs. Dr. Gibbs, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
All right. Well, I'm Dana Gibbs. Actually, Dana Gibbs Clark now. I got married, so that's fun. I'm an otolaryngologist. I graduated medical school a long time ago, 1994, and worked mainly in a private practice in a group in ENT for 20 years. I also was the medical director, manager / driving force behind our allergy clinic. And so I learned a lot about allergy and diseases related to allergy there, which was really pretty cool. But I have recently retired from my ENT and am branching out into hormone and thyroid management. I was always kind of into thyroid, and it just seemed like a pretty natural extension. So that's what I'm getting ready to do. I'm getting ready to open a brand new private practice.
That's super exciting. I bet you're also thrilled to have something new to do.
It wakes me up every day.
For sure.
Keeps me up at night.
You're an ear, nose, throat. I'm not going to try to say otolaryngologist because I can't say it.
But okay.
Ear, nose, throat, ENT. How did you get into hormones?
So I'll try to keep it brief because it's a little bit of a long story, but I was in this allergy society. It was the Pan-Am Allergy Society. It was a small thing in Texas, and it drew in a lot of unconventional speakers about anything that could help with environmental management or improve allergy symptoms. And I had seen all the lectures before that were in one track. And so I wandered into another lecture set, and they were talking about hormones and thyroid and things. And the guy started saying, well, you don't have to have a low TSH to have thyroid abnormalities. And he started talking about how he treats his patients. And my jaw just dropped to the floor because the symptoms that he was describing was me in a nutshell. And I thought, holy cow, you mean that's not normal to feel like that? And so I went home and I tried what he said, and it was like this miracle for me. It was like, okay, all of a sudden I can sleep better. I have energy. I don't need to sleep 9 or 10 hours a day. My mood improved, my hair started growing, and, all this stuff that I had just thought, okay, well, this is the normal me. This is how it's going to be for the rest of my life. And it wasn't. And he could not explain to me why my labs were normal, but I needed to take this particular kind of thyroid medicine. And so I started looking for the answer. And one day I met this guy who became my mentor, and he is a former ENT who has an integrative medicine practice, and he focuses on endocrinology in his integrative medicine practice. And he was able to explain to me why certain people need a different kind of thyroid medicine and why the normal labs that people get don't always show what's wrong. And I just got more and more interested in it. And so he gave this big, long course, and I took it once, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting, but it's not ENT. I can't do any of that stuff. But thyroid is part of ENT. We see people with thyroid lumps. It's right here. It's in the neck, ENT, head and neck surgery. So I saw people all the time, and they would come in for their sinuses, or they have a lump in their thyroid gland or whatever. And I'm like, no, it's not cancer. We don't need to take it out, or maybe sometimes we do. But I would look at them, and they would come back with a prescription for thyroid, or sometimes not even a prescription. And I'd be like, but you have thyroid problems. I can tell by looking at you that you have thyroid problems. And so I started treating people's thyroid abnormalities, and I got better and better at it over the years. And they kept saying, well, are you going to treat the rest of the hormones? And I'm like, no, I'm an ENT. No, I'm an ENT. I can't do that. It was in a group practice. So I didn't. But I stayed interested in it. And then as I got into menopause, it was like, oh, okay, I don't feel great again. Here we go. And I knew it was hormones because I just had heard enough about it from my mentor. So I started tweaking and reading and looking and learning more again. And recently I collaborated with him, and we are just on the last iteration of the very last session But we taught that whole course again, and it's a 10-week, 2.5 hours a week of material on the different kinds of hormones in your body. So fascinating stuff. And when I retired from my ENT, I decided, hey, you know what? I can now do this full time without making my partners mad. So here we go.
Wow, that's awesome. I know that I was trying to be a part of that course, but it is, like you said, a big time commitment.
It's a very comprehensive thing. And, one of these days you'll get time to do it, hopefully, when you're not quite so involved in building your practice.
You mentioned a bunch of things there. One, can you explain a little bit more about what integrative medicine is to our audience?
Okay, so integrative medicine means different things to different people. But to me, coming from a background doing surgery, integrative means anything that works and has been proven to work. And so I don't just look at a thyroid gland as something I need to take out of people anymore. I look at it as, okay, how can we optimize the function of that? And by learning how to use supplements and learning how to use diet and learning how to use exercise, as well as prescription medicines, I can get people feeling really, really well, way more than I can just by giving them pills. And so to me, that's what integrative means. It means I'm using every means at my disposal that work, that I have satisfied to myself that work to treat those people. So it's not just herbal, it's not just exercise and diet, it's everything combined.
Gotcha. So yeah, I think somewhat of my definition is similar. Mostly like it's not just throw a medicine at a person, but treat the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you also mentioned a lot of things about hormones. So what is a hormone?
Okay. So hormones are chemicals that your body makes, that certain glands in your body, which are called the endocrine glands, make, that circulate around in your body and signal your brain or your cells or your muscles or whatever part of you to do certain things, to make certain other chemicals, to grow, to not grow, to be excited or be depressed or whatever. So it's a whole cascade and balancing act of different chemicals in your body. And it's incredibly complex. And it's really very, very profoundly amazing to me how all of that stuff tends to stay in balance. So your endocrine system is the name for all those glands and all the hormones they make and all the brain chemicals that trigger them to be made.
Okay. Yeah, I know you also mentioned already like a couple specific hormone names, but what about the stress hormone? How is that involved in endocrine system and imbalance?
Sure. Okay, so your adrenal glands, they're little lumps that sit up on top of your kidneys, make your stress hormones. And there are two parts to that. So there is the adrenaline, which is made by the inner part of the adrenal gland, and the chemicals that are like adrenaline. Those are the ones, like, say you nearly get in a car accident, for example, and your face starts to flush and you sweat and your heart races and time slows down and then it fades away and then you're shaky. That's adrenaline. So that is a very quick acting. And we don't actually even, I guess it's a hormone, but it's really a neurotransmitter. It does things in your brain and all over your body in an instant. The other part of the adrenal gland makes what we call steroid hormones. And the reason they're called steroid hormones is because they're made from cholesterol. And there are about 50 different ones. Some of them are more important than the others. Some of them are precursors, some of them are active. But the main stress hormone is called cortisol. And cortisol starts as cholesterol and goes through a couple of iterations, several iterations before it becomes cortisol. And cortisol is the slower part of managing stress. So cortisol goes up when your body is under more prolonged stress. So say you're not, sprinting away from the tiger, but say you're like, I have to get to a town 5 miles away from here in 2 hours. And so then you're going to run. And your steroid, your cortisol, is what bumps up your blood sugar and feeds your muscles more sugar and does a lot of different things to help you manage that more lengthy stress that happens.
So I guess you're trying to differentiate between acute stress and chronic stress, right?
Well, right. And so
Yeah.
acute stress and chronic stress, you can put the dividing line at anything past like 5 minutes, you're starting into the cortisol. Whereas if it's less than 5 minutes and then it bleeds away, you don't have as much of that cortisol response unless it happens over and over and over again, or unless you're going around scared all the time because you're in an abusive relationship for some reason, or because you're in chronic pain, or because something like that. The other thing that can happen is if your body has pumped out so much cortisol that it kind of runs out of raw materials, then it goes back to adrenaline. And so then you can get into a situation where you're being amped with adrenaline all the time and you get this hypervigilant anxiety going on, which is a very interesting thing. And that can happen if you have too much cortisol or if you have not enough cortisol at any given moment.
So would you say that cortisol is responsible for the stress and endocrine imbalance?
I mean, cortisol is what your body uses to respond to that stress. And it's an adaptive thing. It's something that helps us survive in the short term. But when it becomes really chronic, where it's every day, all the time, then it becomes more, the word we use is maladaptive, which means it's helping, but it's also doing things to your body that are not ideal, that are not helpful.
So what kind of things?
Oh boy, lots of things. Lots of things. Like, so for example, it creates a situation where you become more resistant to insulin. And insulin resistance is something that I've heard 30 to 40% of Americans naturally have from a genetic standpoint anyway, but it makes it worse. And so what that does is your body has, your pancreas, which is actually a totally other part of your endocrine system, your pancreas, which makes insulin, has to pump out more and more and more. And eventually it can't keep up. And then your blood sugars start to rise, which is when you call it diabetes. But in the time where you have more insulin, but your sugars are still normal, the insulin itself goes around and creates all kind of havoc. It can cause you to be depressed. It can cause you to be anxious. It causes you to be fatigued. I mean, there's this giant list of different things that it does in your body. And that's not the only thing. The other thing that happens is that your adrenal gland makes other steroids. It makes other hormones besides cortisol. But cortisol is the one that's like number one. I mean, you have to have cortisol or you're going to die. An example of that is Jane Austen. A lot of people know who Jane Austen was. She was a writer who lived in the 1800s, and she was very stressed. Her parents were poor. She didn't find a husband. She wasn't married. Her sister wasn't married. Her brothers had low-paying jobs, so they were trying to maintain their facade of high society at the same time as they were slowly going broke and starving to death. And Jane Austen died, what we think, she died at age 41 after gradually getting weaker and weaker until she literally couldn't get out of bed. She died of what's called Addison's disease. And what Addison's disease is a total failure of your adrenal glands. So you can't live without them. But they don't just make cortisol, they make a different hormone called aldosterone. And aldosterone is what your body uses to keep your kidneys from peeing out all your salt and water. If you don't have that, then you can't keep your blood pressure up and you may find yourself getting faint and dizzy all the time. So if your adrenal is making so much cortisol all the time, then it will steal from the other hormones that it's supposed to make. And even though you can't live without aldosterone, eventually it starts to get deficient. And that's when you get this, okay, now I'm weak. Now my blood pressure is low. Every time I stand up, I feel like I'm going to faint. And I have experienced that myself personally. I didn't know what it was at the time. That was while I was in medical school. And I would get up at 5 a.m. to go do rounds. And I would have to squat down in the hallway because I was getting ready to faint. And it happened over and over. And people made fun of me. And I just thought, I'm just weak. That's all. I'm just a weak human being. That's it. I had no idea what was going on. The third thing that cortisol steals from is your sex hormones, your estrogen, your progesterone, your testosterone. And it actually steals from those first. So for example, if you think of an Olympic athlete, like somebody who runs marathons, a woman particularly who runs marathons, very, very frequently, they will have very irregular periods or they'll stop having their periods. And it's not because their brain isn't signaling to their other endocrine glands to make those hormones. It's just that your body has basically just run out of the raw materials and it can't make them anymore. So then people will get things like dysmenorrhea, they will get irregular periods, they will have infertility. Even if they can have a baby, then they'll have really bad postpartum depression. There's just so many different things that can go wrong when you are just chronically stressed.
So you're saying chronic stress leads to, I guess, stealing, which I thought was a great explanation. I haven't heard it in that way before, but stealing from the sex hormones causing dysmenorrhea, but also stealing from the other hormones and causing decrease in blood pressure and mood changes, even, well, not with the stealing, but insulin resistance in general.
Yeah.
Are there any other things that go wrong when you have this chronic stress?
Well, okay, so we talked about insulin resistance a little bit. So
Mhm.
insulin resistance is kind of the number one thing that goes wrong in polycystic ovary syndrome. And lots of even very young people into their teens will have that issue. And there's lots of different ways you can treat it. But one of the things that you can do is manage that insulin resistance with your diet. And so that's one thing that's kind of a spin-off of having too much cortisol, is that you end up having too much insulin, and PCOS is one of the things that it causes.
Oh, absolutely. So stress, everybody has it. It's a fact of life. So what can we do about it?
Oh boy, so many things. So I know you're starting to transition your practice to lifestyle medicine, and I'm really loving that trend because for so long, doctors were just taught that we should just give everybody medicine. And the problem with that is that the best ways to manage insulin resistance, for example, is not to take medicine. It's to exercise more. It's to stop eating processed starchy carbs. It's to stop eating sweets. Something that was super interesting to me about was that insulin is independent. It's independent in a way initially of your blood sugar. So you put something sweet in your mouth, your insulin rises before your body even has a chance to absorb that sugar. So if you take something that's a diet sweetener, a non-calorie sweetener, it triggers your body to release stored insulin. And when insulin goes up, blood sugar goes down, and then you can get the shakes, you can get hypoglycemia, and it causes your body to then want to make even more insulin later. It causes you to be hungry to eat starch so that your blood sugar can come back up to where it was. So I was just fascinated by that the first 30 minutes of your insulin response is to the taste of the sweet, not to the actual calories that go in. I was fascinated when I found that out.
I've heard that, and I get that question a lot from patients, like,
Yeah.
is the diet calorie sweetener okay, or is it going to spike the insulin? And yes, I usually say it does spike the insulin.
It's absolutely horrible. So other things that you can do to manage your stress is to do things that we know downregulate your sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic sounds really good, sympathy and all that, but sympathetic and parasympathetic are two parts of your involuntary nervous system that get you ready either to relax and sleep and digest your food. That's the parasympathetic or the sympathetic nervous system that gets you ready to run and think sharp and be on your feet and just keyed up and ready to go. So what we already talked about, the over expression of adrenaline, which is kind of the number one thing that spikes your sympathetic nervous system. So you want to do things that calm that down, and things like mindfulness, even meditation, things like doing a hobby that you really like that requires you to focus all your attention on what you're doing right now. And then meditation and getting real regular sleep, sleeping for your 8 hours and going to bed at the same time every night. Turning off social media has been really proven to really help downplay your sympathetic nervous system and move you towards parasympathetic, which helps drop that cortisol and make you feel better. There are also some supplements that you can use, and I really like two that I'm going to just mention really briefly. One of them is something called neonatal bovine adrenal cortex. And what this is, it does not have adrenaline in it. It does not have cortisol in it or cortisone in it. What it has in there is some of the raw materials that your adrenals need to make all the stuff that they're going to make. So if you're feeling like, okay, I'm starting to have that steal phenomenon where I have not enough estrogen, I'm having hot flashes, or I'm having vaginal dryness, or all those things, you can take that bovine adrenal cortex, and it's kind of like, I'm going to use the analogy of a car factory. So the cholesterol is the raw steel that your adrenals need. The next step in the line is something called pregnenolone. So pregnenolone is the formed steel parts that the car is made of. The bovine adrenal cortex is the nuts and bolts and the factory workers that put it all together. And without all three, you can't make all those hormones that you need. And so if you add over-the-counter pregnenolone, which is the steel parts, and then you add the adrenal cortex, then your adrenal glands have more raw materials to work with, and you don't get that steal phenomenon anymore.
So pregnenolone and the bovine one are the two supplements that you were talking about?
Yes,
both of them.
They
Okay.
are. And then one other thing that I didn't mention was that when your cortisol goes up and when your insulin goes up, it actually pushes down your thyroid gland. And your thyroid gland is kind of the driver of your metabolism. It helps you keep your body warm. It helps your muscles work. It helps you sleep more regularly. It does a lot of stuff in your body. And so your thyroid can't work as efficiently when your cortisol is all whacked out. And so I have seen a lot of people who were like me, where their TSH was maybe a little bit high or it was normal. And their other numbers were a little bit off, but they weren't terrible, but they just didn't feel good. And one of the things that happens is that we just don't have enough of these nutrients in our diet. And the ones that I like are iodine, selenium, zinc, magnesium. And there are two supplements that I like. And one of them is something called a trace mineral supplement, because you don't want to take too much iodine. Your thyroid needs iodine to make thyroid hormone. It's kind of one of the key building blocks. It also needs selenium. The proteins in your thyroid need selenium in order to work. They also need zinc. So those three minerals are super, super important, but not in huge amounts. In large amounts, they're just as bad as in not enough. And so there's a trace mineral supplement that has about the right amount of all three of those if you take it twice a day. And then also you can take a bigger supplement. You know, people know they ought to be taking a calcium supplement if they don't drink dairy products, for example. But what they don't realize is that magnesium and zinc are equally as important for other kinds of functions, other parts of your endocrine system beside your adrenals. But those two in particular are mineral supplements. And I find a lot of people who are deficient in those minerals and can get a lot of help just by taking the right amount of those things.
I wanted to ask, going back to other ways of releasing stress. So I get this question a lot. Basically, people think they are relaxing and releasing stress by watching TV at night.
Oh
Can you
boy.
speak to that?
Oh boy. No, no, I
Does
don't
it? Yeah.
think so. I don't know if there are specific studies that show against it. I do know that the blue light that's emitted by
Right.
screens has been implicated in suppressing melatonin, and melatonin is another part of your endocrine system. And you need melatonin to get sleepy, to fall asleep.
Mhm.
So, if you're going to watch TV, don't watch TV within an hour of when it's time to go to bed. The other thing is that you'd be much better off to put on some music and do some yoga, do things that stretch and move your body rather than just sitting and watching TV. Now, you don't have to go out and run. You don't have to go out and sweat and make yourself all tired, but just doing things that are just movement, stretching, Tai Chi, even just standing up out of your desk and stretching your arms over your head a couple of times every hour is probably a good way to do that. But yeah, TV, not so much.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do think there's a study. I might have to look it up and find it, but there is a study that showed that watching TV did not decrease cortisol levels. Yeah.
No,
So,
I'm pretty sure
right.
that's true.
Yeah, I definitely don't encourage that. And then the other thing is if they're watching, depending upon what they're watching, there might be activating their sympathetic system and
Right. If
going
it's
in
like
overdrive.
some kind of really action drama or something like that, then it's
Right.
amping you up. It's not relaxing you. So it may have more to do with what you choose to watch on TV
Right.
than the fact that it's TV itself. But then they turn on the ads, and the ads are 4 times larger, and it startles you. And that every time you startle, that's more adrenaline.
Mm-hmm. So what are we missing anything? Like what else do you want to mention before we close out?
Wow, gosh, I have
Because you have a lot.
many more. I have so much more. We could talk for probably 20 hours.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do think that a lot of people have misconceptions about and that they're missing is vitamin D. And vitamin D, it's called vitamin, but it's really a hormone. It has so many actions in your body, particularly on your immune system, which I was very surprised about. Yes, it does help you uptake calcium from your food and make it available to your body. But it also does a lot of positive things in your immune system. And they've done a lot of studies now showing that higher levels of vitamin D actually prevent a lot of cancers. And the higher you get it, the more different kinds of cancer it prevents. And if you can get, I think it's milligrams per milliliter is the way it's checked when you check it in a blood test. But if you can get that level up around 65, it actually prevents like 40% of breast cancer. And I was just blown away by that. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, so many different kinds of cancer. And that's at levels that are basically twice the recommended low normal values as of right now. And I think actually the Rheumatologic Society has started really pushing people to get those levels up, which I'm excited to see.
Interesting. Yeah.
Anyway.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You mentioned, your course, but where else can people find you?
Okay, so I have a website. It's danagibbsmd.com. That's going to be my new practice website. And I have a link tree, which is linktr.ee at danagibbsmd. So you can find me there.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on. And I think everybody got a lot out of this, and I know I did. So I can't wait to see everybody next week. And if you're looking for a doctor in Clearwater or Palm Harbor, I'm your girl. And you can find me at www.cfma.health and .health, because that's the business we're in. All right.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on, Dr. Reller. It was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.